So here we are again, yet again. Another attack out of the blue. Children involved again. It's a struggle to know what to say about these things. Um, every time it happens, um, there's the shock of these things, and it almost the first thing that seems to happen is that the media and the politicians try to downplay what's happened. The first thing was it's not terror related. It's the first thing, as if that would be, um, as if somehow that makes it better. Uh, um, and and then there was um, the sort of what would you say the anti-rumor that it wasn't a migrant, wasn't a migrant, wasn't terror related, had to do with mental health. The denial of the obviousness of what's happened. And then you get the platitudes, you know, we're deeply shocked. Deeply shocked. But that's all right then, isn't it? So long as we're deeply shocked, then well, we can move on then. You know, we're deeply shocked. We're deeply shocked, and the thoughts and prayers with the families, and then they start, and then there's it's a it's a script. Then they thank the first responders, and this stuff is not. It's not wrong to say those things in the first instance. The thoughts of with the families, and to thank the first responders. That's not wrong on its own. But then they never get to the next paragraph. The next paragraph should be, well, what are we going to do about this? And what are we going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? And of course, the first and most obvious thing to do to make sure that this doesn't happen, or to at least lessen the chance of this happening again. It's not a guarantee, but considering that so many of these attacks are carried out by migrants or illegal migrants, the first thing to do, and it is still bolting the stable door after the horse is bolted, is the first thing to do is to stop the immigration. That's the first thing to do. It won't have an immediate effect because there's, thousands of these fuckers already here. These people that are here or came here of their own volition, or were sent here with the express purpose of doing us harm. It won't have an immediate effect, but at least we won't be importing any more of them. And all these sort of pathetic politicians in particular, but celebrities, and standing up with their sign saying refugee welcome. So was this refugee welcome? Is he still welcome? Yeah, this is the following morning, um, and I believe that I think it was two of the children have died. So instead of actually doing something, having some sort of policy, some sort of response that might be effective, it seems like the government response is going to be, well, um, let's have another candlelit vigil. Let's not look back in anger. Let's do that, shall we? Yeah, we'll do that because that's worked, hasn't it? That's worked well enough um, that this won't happen again. You know, so let's do that, shall we? That's as far as government policy goes. And one of the things I don't really understand about this is that the politicians are so enamored of their own position. They say things like they put their hands to their chest and they say, well, defense of the realm is the first responsibility of government. That's what they keep saying. And of course that should be what they do, but they say that because it makes them seem important. Whereas mostly what we want them to do is to empty the bins. We know they're not going to. We know they're not going to protect us. We know they're not going to protect us against all these psychopaths in our midst. But at least, if they're not going to do that, their supposedly solemn first duty, then they could at least empty the bloody bins. But there's no glory in that, is there? The evidence shows that they believe their first priority is to make solemn pronouncements when something horrendous happens, rather than actually doing anything about it. That seems to be what their first priority is. The first duty of government is to say, let's not give in to hate. I mean, the other thing, for a government to be, I mean, they're concerned with being popular and liked, but the weird thing about this is that in order to be truly popular, all they have to do is stop the immigration. If they're so concerned about being popular, which they appear to be, narcissists that they are. But it's the one thing they won't do. It's to be no matter what stripe of government you get in, no matter what happens, no matter how many people are blown up or stabbed, or how many children are murdered in cold blood, absolutely the one thing they will not do is stop the murderers coming here. They'll do anything else. Schemes to Rwanda, trying to bring in ID cards, digital ID cards. They'll think of anything rather than stopping the ability, uh, of psychopathic murderers to come here. I mean, it just seems as if the one thing that government will not do is to be at all, not in the slightest bit, responsive to anything that the British public want. That's what they won't do. Do you remember when Donald Trump was newly president, and one of the first things he did was to um, stop immigration from a number of Muslim majority countries, and the howls of outrage from people all across America and around the world. Look at this racist bastard. Look what he's doing. He's a fascist. Yeah, it's 1930s Nazi Germany again. But if you listen to actually what he said at the time, he said we need to stop these people coming from these countries until we can figure out what's happening. He said something like that, something along those lines, until we can figure out what's happening. He didn't say we must have no more immigration from Iraq and Afghanistan and Algeria and all these places. He didn't say forever. He just said until we can figure out what's happening. And to me, that sounds eminently sensible. All of these, all of these psychopathic murderers are coming from somewhere else, somewhere else. It seems where being a psychopathic murderer is not an unusual thing. You know, there's a video going around with some lefty tosser radio presenter. I think it was on LBC, and he's trying to challenge this guy who's saying that all these all these people come from overseas, and he says, you know, do you think that people from overseas have a greater propensity to violence than people coming here? You know, setting up the question as if to try and trap this bloke into saying, well, yeah, I think it's all black and brown people, you know, which, you know, he didn't say, but he was being caricatured as if that was the case. But there is, you know, quite obviously something in this. And I was speaking to a chap the other day on Saturday when I was at the Tommy thing, and I was asking him, I was saying, you know, trying to get to the bottom of this, and I was saying to him that some of this behaviour from some of these people is so far beyond the pale. It's it's just nothing that we would ever experience here in the West. From, you know, apart from a few nutcase serial killers, this is just nothing. This is something that doesn't happen. People are not like this, attacking kids in a playground with a knife in broad daylight. You know, these sorts of things. And this was on Saturday before this had happened. And he was saying, and this is somebody who knew. This is a bloke who spent quite a long time living in Pakistan. And he made a point which I hadn't considered. He said quite a lot of these people come from war zones. And what happens in war zones? You know, society breaks down. There's no law and order. There are no social norms. You know, you get what you want by being more violent than the other bloke. So there is something about these people. These people are more predisposed to psychopathic violence than the people who live here. So it probably is true. But you know, the radio presenter, you know, just like sat on his high horse and looked down at the ignorant racists who phoned up him in his important job as a radio presenter, spewing out the government mainstream narrative, and basically patronised him to within an inch of his life. He demonised him really. When things like this happen, you know, you try to wonder why these things are happening, because you and I have probably never met anybody who would do anything like that. Yeah, we might have done, but yeah, I think it's pretty unlikely, you know. And these things happen again and again and again and again. And it makes you speculate as to, you know, if somebody's, because you can't think of somebody doing something like this because it is so evil. You begin to wonder. This is the basis of my question for this chat the other day. You know, it's like it's. I mean, of course, it's not normal, but is this stuff? This stuff is so abnormal. It can't be random. You know, and you know, I know I'm straying into speculation and conspiracy, but it seems if some of these people are encouraged by God knows who, encouraged to come here and cause havoc. You know, I don't know how that would happen. How don't know. You know, I don't know what possible incentive somebody might have for that. Um, I mean, of course, I suppose the you know the first official life. I mean, I suppose it is feasible that this was a mental health issue, but I mean, also there are so many of them, and the fact that they reach for mental health as soon as they say that, and it's not terror related, suggests that that isn't true either. But you know, why would you come here deliberately to cause chaos and havoc? You know, yeah, I mean, it's possible if you would, you know, I mean, a particularly evil person would do such a thing, but there just seem to be so many of these particularly evil people. Now, we've got thousands of these people here now, tens of thousands even. So we can't, you know, immediately do anything about the people that are already here. But one thing we could do is stop more coming. We could do that overnight. I mean, we're still part of the European Court of Human Rights, which is, a lot of people are saying we should leave, and I've changed my mind on that, and I believe that we should leave that. And but even though we still are, and we just completely violated it and said, well, we're not doing that anymore. Which is funny because violating international norms and treaties is perfectly okay um, in certain circumstances. I mean, during COVID, they violated the European Court of Human Rights on bioethics, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights on bioethics, and the Nuremberg Code. They just fucking steamrolled that lot. They fucking steamrolled it. Oh no, it's an emergency. It's an emergency. Well, we're not doing that now because it's an emergency. Oh, it's a bit inconvenient because we wanna fucking vaccinate everybody. You know. So all this do no harm and the consent of the patient is paramount. Oh no, we're not doing that now because because it's an emergency. And yet something like this happens, and they say, oh, we couldn't possibly violate the European Court of Human Rights. Couldn't possibly do that. Oh, it's against international law. It's against it. I mean, what would our contemporaries, when we're on some on the world stage, think of us if we went to the G7 or the G20 and and they and we were the people that had violated all these international norms? What would they think of us then? Because that's what they seem to care about most of all. So, like I say, they don't. When they consider something is an emergency, they'll bulldoze every single convention and right and treaty and whatever it is. But somehow, the murder of children, defenceless children, in a playground in broad daylight is somehow not an emergency. Oh no, it's not an emergency. We have to adhere to international laws and laws and codes and customs. International law. That's the most important thing, isn't it? We mustn't violate international law, And well, if some children get stabbed in a playground in broad daylight, then well, at least we haven't violated international law. At least we haven't done that. People must begin to realise that the safety of the British public is there is not even a pretence of a priority from the British government for that. They concern themselves about other things, mostly about themselves. They will be concerned with the safety of the British public and the prevention of the murder of our children only when it aligns precisely with their own agenda. You know, and I can't actually think of an example of when that when that was the case. Certainly wasn't the issue with the grooming gangs, for instance. So this unresponsiveness to anything that we might actually want, us as the people who pay their wages and make make their globe trotting lifestyle on the world stage possible, the last thing in the world that they'll think about is us and what we might want. Now, I'm sure the parents of the murdered and injured children will be quite, I'm sure they'll be comforted by the fact that we haven't violated international law. I'm sure they'll think, oh well, at least we haven't violated international law. That's really quite a good thing. I'm really quite pleased about that. The government and the authorities in the establishment and the institutions continue to demonstrate to us time after time after time after time that we are not their concern. Their concern is to manage us and to control us. I mean, it sounds obvious now, but it sounds obvious to us. But there's still there's a great bulk of people out there who think that the government is there to look out for them, and that's not a surprising um, that's not a surprising viewpoint. I mean, that's what they're supposed to do, and we pay them money to do that, and they have all of these um, instruments and the all this power of the police and the military and all this sort of stuff to supposedly do that, and yet they don't do it. So I suppose it's not surprising that people still think that. I mean, they're not thinking very hard, if at all. But that is the way things are supposed to be. We have to make people understand this isn't easy. We have to make people understand that our government is the enemy. It's the biggest enemy of all. I mean, remember a month or two back, maybe not even as long ago as that, there was the policeman who got shot by a crossbow. I mean, there's the crossbow murders, yeah. And it just seemed, you know, it's the same old thing, isn't it? It's like somebody recognised that there was a loophole in that you could buy a crossbow and you didn't need a permit to buy a crossbow. And a crossbow is a deadly weapon. You know, you can kill somebody from a long way away with a crossbow. And it seems to me that somebody realised there was this loophole, and then all of a sudden, because there was some chatter about it on the internet about we need to defend ourselves. Guess what? You can get a crossbow. You don't need a permit or anything like that. And then almost as soon as that chatter came up, there was a crossbow murderer. You know, and then completely predictably, oh, we've got to ban crossbows. We've got to ban crossbows because you know there's a horrific murders taking place. And, I mean, if they could ban knives, they would. But obviously you can't ban knives, can you? You can't ban kitchen knives and carving knives. And I don't know what particular knife was used in this attack, but I mean, it's becoming increasingly obvious that the government won't protect us, so we have to protect ourselves. We have to defend ourselves. We have to have some way of defending ourselves. And the first thing that the government does is prevent us from defending ourselves. And that's what they do. Yeah, I mean, the thing that happened in, you know, the um, the shooter in New Zealand. Oh, was it Wellington? Was it Christchurch? One or the other? Can't remember. Christchurch, I think. Um, the mass shooter. Attacking all the Muslims. You know, and you know, less than a year later, they had the COVID thing. So suddenly they had a population that couldn't fight back in any way. So government policy appears to be ensure that loads and loads of countless numbers of psychopathic murderers come here unhindered. In just in a random way that we don't know about. So we don't know where they are, we don't know who they are, where they've come from, what their past is. That's the first thing, and then the second thing is so you invite all these dangerous nutcases in, and the next thing is you make sure that cannot be we cannot defend ourselves from these psychopathic nutcases. So that's the two planks of it, basically. You will have these dangerous criminals in your midst, and you will not defend yourselves. And and guess what? We won't defend you either. So that's nice, isn't it? And they will exhort us to not give in to hate. I mean, how long will it be? I mean, how many weeks and months will it be? I mean, it won't be weeks probably, but it'll probably be only months before there's a load of virtue signalling politicians and celebrities will holding up signs saying refugees welcome again, having completely memory hold this whole thing, you know, and so the story will be memory hold, you know, and for the rest of us, but the murder of their children won't be memory hold by their parents. Not going to be able to memory hold that, you know. They won't be interviewed. They won't be if they say anything vaguely vengeful, which is completely rational. If any of them say anything vaguely vengeful, they won't be interviewed. You know, they won't be asking them what they think government policies should be. The BBC and the Guardian won't be saying, "Oh yeah, look at this. This poor person. Their 8-year-old daughter was murdered. Let's see what they've got to say about illegal immigrants, shall we?" So, they won't interview that person, you know, but they will search around and find the safe person who has um, who has suffered this kind of loss, and for some bizarre reason, is still full of empathy and compassion for poor third worlders, and this person will come along and say, "Oh yes, well let's not blame all the Muslims, or all the refugees, all the migrants. Let's not do that. I lost my child, but let's not give in to hate." They'll find that person. They'll be all over the news, and then they'll say, you know, and then they'll say, "Oh, Tommy Robinson is exploiting this for his own ends." So much of this seems to be sort of down pat. You know, we'll create the conditions so that people cannot defend themselves, and once they've been disarmed, we won't do anything then. We'll just let them be murdered and let their children be murdered. And we are being pushed beyond endurance here. And there was a post by Gareth Ike yesterday, which I reposted because I didn't think it was yeah, I thought it was worth considering. And you know, it, it's always a bad idea to lose your head in these things. But he made the point that the country is a powder keg, and it's being it's set to blow. And between it will be between the native population and the immigrant communities, and this is how it's going to be. And he made the point that that each side is designed to lose, and this is worth considering. The divide and conquer is the oldest trick in the book. I mean, it is. Yeah, and we should always be mindful of that. But we can't ignore this. We may not want there to be, um, you know, a race war in this country. We may not want that. I don't want that. I'm sure most people don't want that. But that is likely to happen if this stuff carries on. And the thing is that we've had sort of more than three generations of peace and prosperity in this country, and it's softened us up. We are soft as fuck, and yeah, in in a way that's not a bad thing, because that's the way civilization should be. You know, this is how we should behave towards each other. With civility and based on rules and consent, and You don't do whatever you like if it fucks everybody else off. You know, this is what civilization is. But there comes a time when civilization has to be defended. And I'm talking about civilization here rather than the establishment or the authorities or the state. That's different. That's a different thing entirely. You know, civilization is how you get on with your neighbours and how you get on with strangers you meet in the street. Yeah, it's about not jumping red lights and queuing for the post office. You know, these are established norms. And because we've been so pliant for so long, the authorities think we do not have a breaking point. That's what they think. And thus far, they've been right. But my feeling is that somebody's only got to break the taboo. If somebody breaks the taboo, then the floodgates will open, and hell will be everywhere. The worst kind of hell, the hell where you can't go out of your house without a weapon. You've got to have bars on your windows, and there's certain places you don't go. Now, these consequences are obvious as far as I'm concerned. And if they're obvious and the logical conclusion to what's happening, you have to ask yourself, is it deliberate? And if it's deliberate, then, what's the motivation? You know, we all know it's all WF and 15-minute cities and the surveillance state and, all these horrible things. But you can't really get away from that conclusion. Every single thing that Western governments are doing is destroying the West. Every single thing that they're doing, from COVID to Ukraine to climate change to, you know, mass migration, the trans shit. Every single thing that they do is destroying Western civilization. And you have to, you end up speculating and wondering why that is. This can't be an accident. This cannot be an accident, what they're doing. If it was random, they would do some things which would help Western civilization, and there's nothing that they do that helps Western civilization survive. I mean, we knew the Labour government would be bad, but just 2 weeks in, they've basically hobbled our energy supply, and now they're saying, "Oh, there's a big black hole in the finances," and yet they're still giving Ukraine over 10 billion quid, and they say these things like, "We will honour our international commitments." Oh, really? Oh, that's good. Yeah, yeah. Like I say, I'm sure those parents are well chuffed we're honouring our international commitments. We have to start telling other people. And I think other people are beginning to, against every fibre of their being, I think they are beginning to understand that something is deeply, deeply wrong. And they've been denying it and denying it and denying it. I've got a very good friend of mine. He's a very intelligent bloke. He knows philosophically, he knows all the arguments. You know, he studied this thing at university and since he takes an interest in it. And, you know, but for instance, on the subject of mass migration, he just refused to see it in any other way than it's an economic thing. You know, if we've got a good economy here, which we fucking haven't, haven't had for ages, um, they will come. And when the economy isn't go, and when the economy isn't good, they'll stop coming. But even he is beginning to sort of think in ways that I've not heard him think before. And it's difficult for people to change their minds. I mean, COVID showed us that. I feel quite confident now in proclaiming that I don't think there ever was a pandemic. I don't think there ever was. And I think the evidence is increasingly backing me up. And have you noticed how this is not it's not a toxic opinion anymore? And people don't sort of people who were full on for the pandemic response, they don't really agree with you, but they don't argue vociferously back at you now. Once the goals have been achieved, the argument is left to sort of die a natural death. I mean, another example of that is the it's taken a long time, but another example of that is the assassination of Kennedy. It's kind of sort of taken as well. Yeah, the CIA probably did it. You know, and nothing happens. Nothing happens. The CIA is still doing their fucking shit everywhere. You know, and then things become quite obvious. The Trump assassination. They're trying to. Some of them are trying to sort of pour doubt on the fact that the attempted assassination of Trump never happened. Like I went to the Tommy Robinson thing on Saturday, and it was a good day. It was a good day. It was a lot of, um, I mean, what would you say? I mean, it was well attended. There weren't hundreds of thousands of people there, but it was well attended. It was, I was just somebody who was there reluctantly, and he said, "Well, I don't think these things do any good." And yeah, to a certain extent, he's right. But I tell you what, definitely doesn't do any good is not attending something like that. You know, but I was reading that another post by that Northern Variant guy who's, he's very, yeah, he's a very intelligent guy, and he's got some seriously good takes on stuff. But he was just pouring cold water on the whole thing. And I just, in a lot of ways, he wasn't wrong to do so. But he seemed to be taking a particular glee in telling everybody else who was less intelligent than him, which is everybody, probably according to him, um, that it was a nothing burger, and he called it Tommy Robinson's jamboree, as if it was a village fete, you know. Um, and look, you do need people making being realistic. You do need people to bring a dose of reality. But we have to do something. And you know, people sneer at demos and rallies and things, and I understand why. Because the big one, of course, was the Iraq War one. They said 1 million people marched. Maybe it was 1 million, maybe it was 500,000, whatever it was, but it's certainly a lot of people, and that didn't change anything. They still invaded Iraq. You so I can understand why people say things like this, but it does, in ways that are not obvious, it does move the conversation along. It can change the direction of conversations, and it can broaden the Overton window about certain things. And that's certainly what was happening on Saturday. Um, but people sneer at things like demonstrations and and rallies, and saying that, and they'll say, "Well, it never does anything." And then when somebody decides to try and do something, like I don't know, like Guy Fawkes planting a bomb in the Houses of Parliament. And if somebody was to do that now, the same people would say, "Well, we shouldn't have done that. Oh, he overreacted. We shouldn't resort to that." Which is it? Which is it? You're talking about things that are we talking about things that make a difference or things that don't make a difference? Sometimes I think that the so-called dissident right is its own bloody worst enemy. You know, I'm not suggesting that we should all uh, pat ourselves on the back for spending 4 hours watching a film in Trafalgar Square, but it's not nothing. It's easy to do nothing. It's easy to do nothing, and it's easy to sneer at other people who try and do things. Well, we're trying to do things in a civilized way. We're trying to persuade people and get people on our side without killing people. Is that to be sneered at? Is that to be sneered at? Well, it never does anything. Well, because there are certain things that will do something, and those are the things that these people will never do. I'm firmly of the opinion that there is only one way to deal with um, the grooming gangs. There's only one way of dealing with it, and we all know what that is. And obviously, I can't say it. And the same with people who murder children in broad daylight. In a daycare centre. You know, we have to accept that there is no rule of law in this country anymore. So we needn't, but we shouldn't abide by it. It's the same old thing. They say, well, go through proper channels. The reason they say that is because they know that proper channels don't work. They think we don't have a breaking point, and it's not surprising that they think that, considering the things that have happened and the things that we've done and the things that we haven't reacted to in a brutal and violent fashion, which is only human. and only natural. But we haven't resorted to that. And we're never given the credit for that, that we haven't resorted to that. And the time is coming when we shouldn't be applauded for not resorting to things like that. I mean, the time has already passed, really, but our patience is being tested unbelievably, beyond endurance. And the same people who say that it's almost the same people who sneer at demos and rallies as not doing anything uh, are the same people who say, well, don't overreact because that's what they want you to do. Oh, that's what they want you to do. Don't. Oh, yeah, they're just leading you into a trap and you're falling for it. You moron. They're the same people who are calling you weak for going on a demo that doesn't do anything. So either you're weak or you're a moron. And you know, there are some sensible people who think that there is you have to build a movement and there's a long-term goal. And I don't disagree with that. I think there is a long-term culture building movement that needs to take place. But, you know, we haven't got fucking time for this, man. The emergency is now. We can't, we certainly can't play nice anymore. We need to organise. And I reiterate my call I've made on a number of occasions now that we need to build uh, a posse of men in every area, as a reaction force to this kind of stuff. Yeah, people haven't been ready to do that. And I understand why not, and I'm not being particularly critical. I understand we're civilized human beings, and we live in a decent civilization, so we don't resort to stuff like this. But that is being used against us. We have to begin to think the unthinkable, and then to do it, because nobody's going to do it for us. You get what you want by letting your enemies know you'll do anything to get it, and then you'll get it. It's the only way you'll get it. So, everybody, try and stay free, but most of all, stay angry.